Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my work. My name is Lu Zhu. I'm now a postdoc fellow at McMaster University, working with Dr. Xi. My presentation today will focus on the analysis of three-dimensional vortices in viscous and viscoelastic turbulence with our recently developed vortex tracking algorithm, VATIP. So in industry, we usually hope to reduce the friction drag in turbulent flow to enhance the transportation efficiency. One way to achieve this goal is by adding polymers into the turbulent flow. With a small amount of polymer, the flow structure and the statistics can be greatly changed, and we could expect up to 18% of drag reduction in certain cases. This fascinating technique has already been adopted in the petroleum industry to help reduce friction drag during the transportation of oil using pipeline. In the past several decades, significant progress has been made in this area. However, some key questions are still waiting to be resolved. Our group adopted DNA simulation to study the polymer-additive viscoelastic turbulence in plane posterior flow. This figure shows the geometry of our simulation domain. The flow is driven by a constant pressure drop and is oriented to X direction, while we have two no-slip wall on the Y direction. The incompressible flow is governed by the Navier equation and the continuity equation, and we just add an additional polymer system to the right-hand side of NS equation to account for the effect of polymers. And the dynamics of polymers in our flow will be described by the Philippi constitutive equation, which basically describes the polymer as a finite extensible nonlinear elastic dumbbell. Generally, in polymer turbulence, as we gradually increase the flow elasticity, the mean velocity of the flow will gradually increase as a consequence of drag reduction phenomena. According to the classical theory, there are several quantitative different stages occur in the system. At the lower limit of elasticity, we have the pre-onset stage, where the drag reduction haven't appeared yet, while the upper limit is the maximal drag reduction, MDR, which prevents the flow drag from further decreasing. Although these two stages are important, our presentation today will be the two intermediate stages, LDR and HDR. These two stages are usually identified according to the influence zone in the turbulent boundary layer. For LDR, polymer can only affect the buffer layers, which lead to the change of flow statistics in this layer. For example, the increasing slope of mean velocity profile. While in HDR, polymers start to change the slope of the mean velocity profile in the local layer as well. The flow structure of LDR and HDR are also different. In particular, we found that the vortices are highly localized in the HDR stage, as we could see in these two movies. These behaviors are consistent with the active hibernating theory, where vortex packets with strong turbulence intensity in the HDR case are corresponding to those active turbulence area, while the big gap between them are regarded as the hibernating turbulent area. In addition to this distribution, if we carefully look at the shape of each vortex, we will also find the differences between these two stages. So, as we already observed such a lot of differences, it's natural to ask what caused such quantitative LDR-HDR transition. To answer this question, we look at the near-wall vortex structure and how their generation and evolution affected by polymers. However, like what I'm plotting here, the vortex field usually contains thousands of vortices, and it's impossible to be directly used for statistical analysis. Now the question becomes, how could we distinguish the vortex field and track individual vortex structure automatically? Although it is intuitive for our eyes to detect each vortex, it's actually very hard for the computer code to do the same thing due to the complexity of the vortex shape and connectivity. So in our project, we developed a new vortex tracking algorithm called VATIP. The goal of this method is to use axis line to represent those vortex tubes. The idea is, If we cut a slice of certain vortex tube, the local maximum should locate at the center of the tube, and these local maxima are treated at the axis point of vortex. And our VATIP method basically tries to connect those closest axis points to form the axis line of the vortex. Moreover, we involve an iterative propagation step which connects different parts of the highly curved vortices. This will give our VATIP method the capability of tracking those three-dimensional vortices, like the hairpin vortex. In this figure, we show the axis line detected by our VATIP method. Different axis lines are marked by different colors. It's clear that the axis line could well represent the shape of those three-dimensional vortices. We also reconstruct the vortex tube from the axis lines and compare it with vortices separated by the spatial connectivity of vortex tube, like in this figure. It turns out that the VATIP method has better performance over vortex separation based on the vortex tube connectivity, as the second method forcibly collects a large amount of vortices. By using the VATIP method, we found that the polymer could influence the lifting stress of vortices. In this joint PDF, where the x and y coordinate indicate the location of a vortex leg and head. For a typical near-wall vortex, the bottom of the vortex are usually the vortex leg, while the top is the vortex head. We also use a vertical band to identify those highly lifted up vortices, which have a large distance between the head and legs. So an LDR, the contour doesn't change, means that the polymer do not strongly affect the lifting of vortices. However, at the HDR, we find that the vertical band are greatly compressed by polymers, and this indicates that the lifting of vortices is suppressed at this stage. We also studied the type of vortices affected by polymers in the two stages. Here, we involve the classification procedure to classify vortices into 6 classes. The closest streamwise vortices are lying in the streamwise direction. Their head can lift up but do not turn to the spinewise direction. Except for the streamwise vortex, other type of vortices all have a large spinewise component. The hairpin vortex has 2 fully developed legs with the head lift up, while the hook vortex can be regarded as an incomplete hairpin with only 1 leg. The branch vortex are more irregular and can have several different shapes, but they are in general similar to the hairpin and hook. Due to the topology similarity, we could also group the hook, branch, and hairpin vortex into the more general class, the 3-dimensional vortices. Here, we also show the percentage of vortices in each class and the function of drag reduction level. The differences between LDR and HDR also occurs here. And LDR, the profile of all kinds of vortices only slightly changes, means that the polymer do not strongly change the type of vortices. But at HDR, the percentage of the streamwise vortices significantly increased, while others suddenly dropped. That basically means the polymer is more efficient to suppress the 3-dimensional vortices at HDR stage. By analyzing vortex shape using VATIP, we found that the polymer in HDR strongly suppresses the lifting stress of vortices, and the streamwise vortex dominates the flow. We believe that this procedure will change the vortex regeneration circle and eventually change the flow statistics at HDR. So in the literature, there are 2 vortex regeneration circles that are widely discussed. The first is the strict instability circle, where a streamwise vortex gradually grows and lift up. Eventually, it will break down to small fluctuations, which add a new perturbation to the flow and may trigger another vortex. The other mechanism is called parent of string circles, which is more straightforward. The evolution of the parent vortex could directly form another of-string vortex on either side of the parent. Essentially, both methods will exist, but in HDR stage, the polymer separates the lifting up of vortices, which block the generation of new vortex through the first circle, and thus change the flow statistics. Our hypotheses are supported by the evolution of vortex packet in the LDR and HDR stage. And LDR, a hairpin vortex A, is gradually generated from our pair of streamwise vortex. This hairpin would lift up and eventually breaking down to small fluctuations. This is exactly consistent with the strict instability circles as we described before. However, an HDR, vortices are more likely to align to form a vortex string, with the head of the new off-string vortex connect with the leg of their parent. This is, of course, a typical parent of string circle. So in summary, our research investigates the dynamics of vortices in the viscoelastic plane posterior flow using our VATIP method. We find that the lifting stress of vortices is suppressed by polymers, and the three-dimensional vortices are largely eliminated at the HDR stage. This will cause the changes of vortex regeneration circles and eventually lead to the LDR-HDR transition.